Hi, everyone. Welcome to 4DMethod, the 4D user group. Today is October 6th, 2021. This is meeting number 52. Unbelievable as it is. Today's agenda, we have I'll talk a little bit about 4DMethod and what we're doing here. We'll get some news from 4D news from Jim and Louise in California. Well, by way of California anyways. We'll talk a little bit about the 4D V19 long-term support LTS release and the latest R release 19R2 and what features were involved in that feature release. I'll talk a little bit about my full-time gig at the Art Institute of Chicago and list box going in a new dimension. That may sound familiar because it's a topic from one of our previous meetings. You may remember that Thomas Maul also presented that one. We'll have a look at a few 4D blog highlights, always coming out with great content there as well. We'll talk about what's to know in the knowledge base of recent. And then we'll have our special topic presenter, Thomas Maul, coming back to present on 4D server monitoring using Grafana and Prometheus. We'll have probably lots of questions and hopefully lots of answers, and then we'll discuss the next meeting that we have planned on November 17th, 2021, last meeting of the year. My name is Brent Raymond. I organize the 4DMethod 4D user group. The website is 4dmethod.com, and we can be reached at 4dmethod@gmail.com. I'm myself a 4D enthusiast and have worked in very many applications and industries and whatnot. I enjoy doing what I do, and I like to share it with others. With the user group here, I'm trying to bring together other 4D developers and 4D users all around the world. We use video conferencing, just like all of business, and thankfully not schools so much anymore, but to allow everyone to connect from all around the world, especially to present from wherever you may be. All of the meetings and previous meetings are recorded and can be seen on the YouTube channel, 4DMethod. Just Google the 4DMethod and awesome content, and you'll see some of our great previous presentations. And our goal here is just to get together and have another outlet for showing off your great work and talking about how to use new features in 4D. And I really enjoy seeing the roles that 4D plays in industries around the world and all the different uses for the application environment that people have found. And I'm always surprised at how different people are doing different things. So with that, there's always an invitation to you all to be a presenter in the group. This is your group. I rely entirely on everyone else's content for the presentation. Sometimes I do one, but then I end up talking for 2 hours and no one wants to hear that. This is your group. Show off your application, your product, your skills, some things you've been working on. It's up to you guys to put together some great stuff. All of us, most of us here have, and if you haven't, now's time. So if you want to check out some of the dates, open dates in 2022, I threw a couple dates up there for next year. Those work for you, let me know. You can see that at the 4dmethod.com/schedule. Our group is not only supported by people who participate, but we also have a Patreon to help make it a little bit easier to pay the bills and put the time in to make this all happen. Our latest contributors at the Mitarbeiter level. That's a coworker in German. And we have some Germans here to correct me when I'm saying it wrong, more than likely. But our latest Mitarbeiters are Guy Alga and Kirk Brooks. Thanks, guys, for jumping in there and helping to support the group. We know that you're here every single group meeting, but that really is nice of you. Thank you. And check out the Patreon to see some of the different support levels that you can see and the benefits that are with each of those. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Jim and Louise at 4D to talk to us about some of the current events that are happening and some of the news coming out of 4D itself.
Well, thank you, Brent. Do you want me to go first, Jim?
Yes, please do, Louise. Thank you.
Okay. Well, nice to meet you, everyone, if we haven't met yet. So I'm Louise for the field marketing. For now, I'm still in France, but I really hope that I will be joining all of you in the US pretty soon as the borders reopen for European citizens. Well, so today I have some quick updates to give you. We will be holding a webinar next week about 4D V19R2. It will be presented by Will and Ad, and they will mainly present our latest features. So they will talk about 4D for Android, 4D View Pro, 4D Write Pro, and developer-friendly tooling, incorporating best practices and more. So you are very welcome to join us, and I will be sending you all the information you need within the following days. And if you have any questions, please contact me. I will be really glad to help you out. And then maybe you already heard a lot about it, but we are doing our 4D World Tour Live 2021. So we had the free live sessions, and we will be soon having our live training session. And same as the webinar, you will get the communication soon, and you will be able to do your own schedule with with all the dates that will be presented to you. So this is the two incoming news that we have for the following weeks. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Nice update, I appreciate that. Thank you, Brent. Also, 52 meetings. Wow, that is just fantastic. Congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment. And your German is just getting so much better. You really understand what you're saying now. Awesome. Yeah, welcome everyone from the Bay Area in California. I'm not in France where Louise is, and sometimes I wish I was there to visit because it's such a beautiful country, but I'm here in California where our San Francisco Giants are getting ready for another run, hopefully into the World Series, but we'll see. So that all happens Friday here in San Francisco. As always, we super appreciative for being invited to these 4DMethod meetings and getting the opportunity to briefly discuss what's going on at 4D. We're all looking forward to Thomas's presentations. His are always interesting, informative, and I'm sure this will be the same. So just a brief update on what's happening at 4D. I can tell you now, going into the end of the year, we're firing on all cylinders here in San Jose and in 4D France. New releases of V19 LTS versions and the R releases that Brent will discuss later in today's meeting. And as Louise mentioned, the World Tour is ongoing. We did the live free sessions on September 9th, and September 23rd. Those were filled to capacity. So thank you all for attending those. Be sure to sign up for the package of the 6 training sessions, 9 hours of new training. Each session is 90 minutes at a very reasonable price for 4D partners. Great sessions. I'd like to highlight the one on switching to project mode to make the most of V19's features. There's so much about project mode now, and all our features are going into project mode that I think that'll be a really good session for you to attend. Right now, this week, we're in the middle of a 5-day beginner training session, and that was sold out several weeks ago. Right, thank you. 5 sessions of 90 minutes, that's exactly right. We sold that out, and those are really informative. I've sat in on those sessions, they're fantastic. The demographics are interesting. There's a lot of attendees from companies that have a lot of 4D developers that are training new developers. There are people attending who are completely new to 4D. And of course, the goal is to grow our 4D community. So our developer base, the partner program, and I think we're doing a good job there. But there's also some longtime 4D developers who are attending the beginner training because there's so much new in 4D now. So that's kind of an interesting thing when I watch the signups coming through, that some longtime 4D developers are also attending beginner training. The blog. So the blog, Brent will also talk about that, so I don't want to jump on that topic right now. I do want to highlight one of the new blog posts by Damien Fuzeau, Introduction to 4D and Version Control Systems. So I think that's going to be super important. That post is going to be one of a couple, I think, but he's done a really good job of starting you out there. And there's a link in that blog post to a LOMS summit session on 4D and Git. And we get a lot of questions about Git, how to use it, and about version control systems as well. So take a peek at that. And as Louise mentioned, we'll be doing the V18R2 webinar next week with Will and Ed. I just get blown away when we release it, an R release, an R2, or a beta of an R version. There's so many new features in the R releases that, I mean, they really do rival some of the major releases we used to put out many years ago with 4D, like a major version release. Now you see all these new incredible features coming out in R release every 3 months. It's astounding. I'm completely amazed by that. Brent's going to talk about V18R2 as mentioned, but I also want to mention the release of V19R3 beta. That the beta came out a couple days after the release of V18R2, and yet another reason to become a 4D partner and have access to these beta versions that are coming out. There are already 13 blog posts from the product owners at 4D detailing new features in V19R3. So we hit the ground running. When we do release a new beta, there's already a lot of new information coming out about that. And of course, on discuss.4d.com, there is a beta forum. So you can ask questions about the V19R3 beta on the Discuss forum on the beta site. So take a look at that. So the main point I'm trying to get out by bringing all this up again and kind of reiterating points that Louise made and Brent will make is that we're communicating more efficiently and with more information than ever before here at 4D. I think longtime developers will agree with that the information is coming fast and furiously, and there's a lot out there. And of course, this 4DMethod meeting certainly helps get the word out, and we appreciate Brent's efforts there. So finally, just to wrap up, I just wanted to say that all the effort that's going into our marketing material and the R releases and everything is showing up in the strength of our financial numbers. I mentioned this in the business presentation at the World Tour live free session. As we head into Q4 now in 2021, we're in the midst of one of our best years ever at 4D. And thanks to all of you as developers and upgrading and maintenance and professional services. And that that financial performance is not just in the US, it's everywhere. It's in all of our global subsidiaries, including 4D Germany, which is also having an outstanding year. So thank you all. It's a really fun, exciting time to be part of the 4D community right now. And I'm happy to be just part of 4D, and we're glad you're all along for the ride. So I think that's it for me, Brent, and looking forward to the rest of the 4D Method meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Louise. No, I'll admit that these meetings, I have a guilty interest in presenting all of this. It's just kind of part of it is professional diligence and trying to keep up with everything. And so this really helps to keep me current on all of the news and features and releases of 4D, and at the same time sharing my notes and hearing from others about what features they really value from it. And it is a torrent of new features and new development strategies that are available now in the new versions of 4D. You know, working on an application that's been in constant development at the museum since about the year 2000. I've never written more new code myself, given all of the changes that are available in the language itself than currently. So anyways, moving on to the new versions, kind of old news, I guess, question mark at this point, but the V19 long-term support was released a month or two ago. Overall, of course, it's all of this, the features of the V19 release would take 2 hours to go through in themselves, but these are the advertised features: object-oriented programming in 4D, 4D for Apple Silicon, which has been reported to have massive opportunities for optimization of your applications, project mode, 4D for mobile, including Android and iOS, Orda classes, Orda everything. I pretty much Orda all the time now. And just great advances with 4D Write Pro and 4D View Pro, which we'll mention a little bit more about later. But right, so we've already also got 4D V19 R2 and R3 on the way. R2 is already released. It's the full release, or whatever the correct terminology is for 4D for Android, but now you can in just about one click generate apps for iOS and apps for Android that communicate directly with your 4D server. And new great features are coming out in every release for this 4D for mobile environment. I, for one, am driving our application as fast as I can towards project mode and being able to take advantage of 4D for mobile within the museum. R2 also has 4D Write Pro and 4D View Pro features and improvements. Specifically with 4D View Pro, has a whole new Spread.js version underlying it, and also the ability to import and easily import and export CSV content into your View Pro areas and out of them. More updates to the object-oriented programming language of 4D, or the features towards that end, such as being able to jump directly to member functions in the docs. That was always something that for all of us full-time or people very familiar with 4D is, we're all very familiar with doing Command K on a Mac, or F1, or however you jump directly from a command to the docs. Well, now those are also available with the member functions as you're doing Orda and working with collections and objects. So that's terrifically convenient and been been looking for that to come out. I'll be happy to use those features. Also, things for working with Git, such as it will automatically give you a Git ignore file so that you can add things like your data file so that you're not constantly pushing data file changes up to Git. And features changes for working and managing with your byte order mark and end of line characters in your imports and exports. I believe that's where that comes into play. And for those of us who are working with components and on Macs, I know we're heavy into components. We've got something like 25 different components now at the museum for converting our utility modules to components. And within the Mac environment, they all need to be signed. That's for security purposes and whatnot. As part of the OS, that's required. So just a lot of great new features coming out in R2. So lots to talk about, and not even really touching R3 right here quite yet, but 19 is going to be very exciting for the architecture of 4D applications, and there's going to be a lot of great things that we can all take advantage of. But I'm gonna switch gears, and on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about Listbox going in a new dimension, more about the Art Institute of Chicago and the application that we developed there, myself and Edgar Hammond. In one of our previous meetings in 2018, a couple of years ago already, Thomas Maul came and showed us some great examples. One of them, I think there were three different apps that he actually shared with us. But the one in particular had a history dating back to, I believe, a discussion that he and I had at the 4D Summit in Washington, D.C., I think. It was, and that's one of the great things I miss about being able to see everyone in person, because these kind of conversations are possible where you can just walk right up to the VP of product strategy at 4D and say, hey, I've got something I need. And so at the museum, we're trying to bring all of our interface elements to use native 4D elements like list boxes, for instance, for all of our interface to make it a little bit more cohesive and easy to work with and easy to manage from a coding standpoint. And so I mentioned that to Tomas, and he apparently thought about it a little bit and came back and said, I've got a great topic for 4DMethod to show how to do a style of grid list box grid interface instead of we've all seen list boxes are generally more a vertical list of records of fields and stuff, scroll up and down, and there's not quite a matrix style where you can expand horizontally and vertically and see more things like he showed here, where they have the movie covers, and then you can click in and see another grid of the actors in each of the movies, and continue to kick in and to click in and see more details and following grids. So so he went through all of the requirements basically of what we were trying to do. Again, a matrix style grid area, horizontal and vertical records, automatically adjusting to the window size, automatically adjusting to the cell content, the cell sizes to the content in the cells, so you can grow or shrink the cells as you work with the area. Having it be performant, sort of lazy loading with large selections instead of filling, if you have hundreds of thousands of records, you don't want to fill all of that data into arrays. No one's going to want to work with work with that, especially if you've got images. And the ability to drag and drop between windows and within a selection. And so it took a couple of years. We've been busy, but in returning to that presentation, I was the past couple months really. Let's see if I can. There we go. Got a little video. Able to take advantage of the tips and the code samples from Tomas's presentation and create the same kind of identical interface to what we had already that users demanded for visually organizing and working with many different artworks and many different fields within our application at the museum. And right in about a period of a week of working with the code or less, using his examples, we were very successful in being able to satisfy all of the requirements, not only working with lots of data that loads in the background, being able to drag and drop, having several different styles of the interface between the grid or a sort of a vertical thumbnail list as well, fit with the drag and drop and reorganizing. And you can see some use of the drag icon as well, which I really dig. If you guys aren't using that, it provides a lot of great insight into your application, into what's happening. And yeah, so I just wanted to really say that thanks again to Tomas for coming up with a great solution for a different kind of interface that we can all use within our applications, and really encouraging us to think creatively about how to use the new features with collections and Orda. So anyways, cool. That's some of the great changes that can come out of these 4DMethod meetings, and being able to engage directly with 4D as a vendor to satisfy some of the needs that we may have in our own applications. All right. So next, we'll get through a couple of the next slides with the blog highlights and knowledge base and get to the good stuff here. In the blog recently, always great information, can't mention all of them, but a few are how to define sleeping timeout for 4D remote applications. The several versions ago, 16, 17 or so, it used to be that when people's client machines would go to sleep, that 4D would get disconnected. So they enabled the ability to stay connected in a sleeping session for the clients to stay connected and just be sleeping. However, the question is, how long should they be sleeping, and tying up potentially licenses for applications for other users that they could use. So now there's a blog article on how to set the remote connection sleep timeout to shorter amounts of time instead of, I think the default was 24 hours or something, 12 hours. But another article on securing your app's resources with a new algorithm. Specifically what they're talking about here is instead of using a standard 4DZ file, which is actually just a zip file that has the ending 4DZ, but you can, for standard 4DZs, you can actually unzip it and see what's in there. Ooh la la. And potentially, if you're selling a product, somebody could tamper with the inside of the file, but now they've allowed you to have a protected zip format on those 4DZ files, which is nice. Another article on how to automate the compilation. This is an interesting topic for, given the ability to have project mode and work with Git and GitHub. and especially if you're making lots of components, and say you want to have some automated testing, compilation and testing for at a regular basis. It talks about how to automate the compilation. It's in the language now, so you can write applications that will compile other applications and perform automated tasks. And then if you want to take it maybe not one step further, but a leap further, there's another article on how to take advantage of GitHub actions with 4D, the ability to build and test and deliver code directly from GitHub. So at a regular schedule on GitHub or in the library, you can call these actions to do the same thing, such as the compiling the project and making new builds of your application. So these are all really powerful tools for us, and it'll be interesting to see how we integrate all of these new capabilities into our own workflows. And finally, a very thorough article on the 4D REST API in combination with React.js to create a full to-do application, web application specifically written in React.js, connecting back to the 4D REST environment, and all of the, I wouldn't call them hoops, but the procedure for how you can do the same kind of web application with your own apps. There's some very useful code there, sort of a good jumping off point for having your own React.js connection to your apps. And kicking over to the knowledge base, few great tips in here as always. How to run built applications with Rosetta on a M1 Mac. May seem like if you have one of the new Macs, your applications that may not already be compiled for native use on the M1, this Apple Silicon, you can click into the properties of the app and tell it, oh yeah, open using Rosetta, which is the interpretation layer. Yeah, so that's a good tip. Compilation target is only available in project databases. So again, if you haven't made the leap to project databases, you should be working towards that. But until you do, you cannot actually compile for the compilation target of, say, Mac Silicon chips, the new M1s. Another reason to get into project mode. Tech tip for how to, say, if you're using web areas in your application, how to create a kind of a find on page feature, so that your standard browser, Command F isn't always available, but it is if you follow this tech tip. And a really great tip or full tech note from Brian Yen on sending and receiving SMS with 4D and Twilio. This is this is something you could sell. I mean, it's some great content out there for connecting your applications with Twilio, which a lot of end customers almost demand for messaging for events that are happening within your application environment. If anyone's not familiar with Twilio, the short Google away, it's a messaging platform for large amounts of messages and that kind of thing. Good stuff in the blog, good stuff in the knowledge base, and good stuff coming up from Thomas Maul. Again, he's joining us from the southern part of Germany called Bavaria. Lovely place. Most of our familiar with Thomas. He's done a couple of 4DMethod presentations, including messaging with 4D v16, list box going in a new dimension. I enjoyed that one in particular. And to this day, those are some of the most watched and most popular 4D Method presentations. As the VP of product strategy for 4D, he has a very important role in guiding development and directions that we can all benefit from in our own industries and our own applications. And I think we'll discover some great tips and tricks and new ideas for integration today in Thomas's presentation. So welcome back to the 4D Method Spotlight.
Thanks. Let me first share my screen.
Okay.
I can focus on talking.
Uh-huh.
Should be this one. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Brent, for inviting me to this meeting and allowing me to present again. I always enjoyed it and realized it's now 3 years ago when I made my last presentations, and I didn't want it to have so a long gap.
Welcome back.
So thinking about what to do, I realized I did some work last Christmas, which might be useful for all of you. So I started about a year ago, around October last year, going up to Christmas, to start rewriting my home automation system. A lot of that is running in 4D, and I was using an early beta of 4D to start using data classes, object-oriented development, and all that kind of things, and learning how to do it. And by learning, I did a lot of mistakes. Code was not faster as expected, was slower as expected. And I did not know, is that my code? Is this computer too slow? Is that too much data? What is the reason? And when I remembered that Jeff Kane from Sweetwater Music showed me at a 4D Summit, and as you said, this was a nice thing with summits, walking around, meeting people, and seeing unexpected things. Yeah, Jeff showed me a nice chart with Grafana, saying this is in the server room. We see all the day what's happening. This made me jealous, and I wanted to have something similar. So when I ran into the issue, I said I need to do the same on my own. And yeah, now I want to share with you what you can do, why it could help you with 4D, and how to bind it with 4D. It's a lot about metrics. You could name it server monitoring. And maybe you have seen my summit presentation, I think 2012, about server monitoring, which was at that time about Isinga and Nagios. These are typical server monitoring tools to check if the server is running or not running. So it is more a yes or no state. They have some way of charts, but very weak. And Grafana is a completely different world. So before going in the details, I'm just showing you what I see at home. So this is my dashboard. I have only some of them. Let's start with Windows. This is an example what I can see about what happened on my machine in the last 3 hours. Mostly idle, not much difference in the threads. The network is quite idle. Hard disk load is in peaks, but with 7 megabyte per peak, not very high. Not much of IOPS. This is 2 or 3, not 2,000 or not 3 million. It's really 2 or 3. I said this is my home system, memory stable. This is an example how a dashboard could look. There are different dashboards. This is another one also for the same computer, which I like more, but it gives you an idea what you can do, how you can present data. So this is for me a better way to see if the CPU is busy or not. If you're monitoring many computers, you might want to see if this computer has 4 cores and 24 gigabyte. And by the way, this is really, that computer is an i3 second or third generation, so 10 years old. As I said, it's running at home. I'm the only user, not doing a lot. Bandwidth is low. My hard disk is fine. This is the internal Windows hard disk for internal Windows recovery. So I don't care if it is full. I can see when I did last restart, CPU usage. It's mostly idle. So these are things you can see and meet if you are searching for problems. There are dashboards for similar things like Linux. If you run a Linux computer, at the end it's the same stuff. And you could do checking for other stuff. So, for example, here you can see let's make a little bit more time. Let's say 6 hours. I can see the traffic running through my router, through the internet, traffic going in, going out. I could see the temperature of this computer. I could see the fan speed of that computer. Let's need to go back to 12 hours because this computer was only running for an hour. So I could see the temperature of different disks on that computer. You could monitor and visualize everything. This is a great thing with that tool. And you can easily zoom into if you want to know more about a different second. It's a very cool way to analyze data backwards. Usually when a customer or a user reports a problem, they say, yesterday the server was slow. They don't say now. So you need to have a way to see what happened yesterday or 6 hours ago. As I said, for me, it's home automation. So just to give an idea, I can see my battery in the house, battery of the car. I need to open a window. The CO2 level is too high. The temperatures, that's 1 hour. The temperatures over the day. The sun was not shining in the morning. This was the solar system on the roof. We had better sunshine in the afternoon, but with a lot of clouds, so always production goes up and down. While the production was going up, my battery went up, it was charged. I could dig down into what happened in my house. You can see the biggest need was the wall box, which is charging the car. So whenever I had enough energy, I started charging the car, and when the sun was going away, I stopped the charging. And I could check if something else was just needing power. I can even see the weight of my cats and dog. I can see how much water we used. So all kind of data, and that we opened the window in the morning and missed to open the window in the living room in the afternoon. This is a way to see the data I'm collecting myself and check if the data is correct. So checking is of course running through 4D, and this is why you are here. These are all data you can retrieve with standard commands in 4D. Like the get memory statistic, returning you how much memory is in the computer, how much is free, how much is used from the cache, and how the cache is changing. As said, this is a one user computer, so one user running all the time. Not much, this is the user, one, and these are the number of processes. So you can have in a chart 2 axes to show 2 different things at the same time, like a number of processes with users. Or here I'm seeing how much data I'm reading from disk, or writing to disk, or reading from cache. So cache has megabytes, disk is kilobytes, 2 different axes in the same chart. But I can see that there are patterns. This is the scrap time I need to produce this report. Scrap time means I'm running code to collect all this data. And this gives me an idea if a computer was sometimes slower than others, like this peaks. This is 6 hours. So in the last 6 hours, I was not reading any data from disk or index from disk. Why? As I said, this is only doing home automation. They have more than enough memory for that. I'm writing data because my sensors are always giving me new data and we need to write into. I'm reading a lot from the cache because I'm doing regular statistics and grouping data and recalculating stuff. And as you can see here, I'm doing it every 15 minutes. I'm needing much more data for indexes than for normal data. And if I go above, you can even see for each table how much I'm reading or writing. So you can go very deeply, and I will go in a minute even more deeper here, just as an overview. And several times I made mistakes with my 15-minute statistics by checking too much data, recalculating too much, and suddenly this switched from 600 megabyte every 15 minutes to 15 gigabyte, 55 gigabyte. So I realized very quickly that my new algorithms, which was supposed to be so much better, needed 100 times more data from disk. So obviously it was slower, but it showed me directly what I did wrong. And even I can go in query times. So let's zoom in here. This is all the queries running in that moment. And behind you can see the millisecond, how long this query is needed. And if I go on the right side, I can see how many queries was executed. So the left side shows the total for one query, 50 times, 100 times. And the right side shows the count. And this helps me to see if I'm running too much queries, if I'm running stupid queries, if I'm running queries too often without index. I said this is a strange system because it's only one user. Let's switch. And this is another nice thing. If you are a consultant and you have 8 customers or 10, you can monitor all your servers and you see them in a single dashboard. So this is now the server in the office. Let's switch to the last 12 hours. So you can see how the people started to work and how the quit, how the number of processes went up when the people arrived in the morning, how the data usage went, scrap time got slower. This is interesting. I don't know why. This is something to look into, why it gets slower during the day. I have no argument now. It's supposed to be flat. I can see how much I read from disk, reading from cache, and hopefully this is transferred by Zoom correctly. If I hover over, I get a tip window showing me all the details. And again, if I want to see what happened exactly between 2 and 2:15, I can select this part, release the mouse, and now I'm zooming in. And now I can really see what kind of query this was happening. So why did we query it 70 times for this field, or 80 times for that field? But I would not care because the speed is super. There's 0 milliseconds for this query. I don't care. Let's switch back. So this is a slower one. Let's look for the slower one. And here I could see, okay, the 80 milliseconds. If this is a search for 2 fields and one of them is not indexed. Okay. So you can really dig down. This data is coming from get database measures. This is a command we have in 4D since version 14, I believe, could be 13 or 14. If you go to knowledge base, you find for get database measures a wonderful technode from Roland, which has its own analyzing software included using SVG to create wonderful charts. The problem is you need to run that, you need to collect it, retrieve it, and then analyze it. The idea here is to have it running all day, just keep it running, feed the data in an external system. And if a customer, if a user complain that the system became slow at noon, you can look at noon what happened. And you can compare that. Here I showed you simple dashboards, one dashboard for 4D, one dashboard for Windows. You could build your own dashboard. Nothing talks against to combine things. You can see CPU load, network load, and query time at the same time. You could really dig down and understand what's happening. And this is something I missed to show, Windows node overview. Yeah, this is my network error rate. My network has currently no errors. And I hope I had no errors in the last 7 days. No, great. So this could be interesting if a customer complains that he has a lot of network clients problems. Client is losing connections and stuff like that. To know if the server itself has network issues is helping a lot when you talk with the IT team. If you have a lot of problems here, I'm sorry, this is the problem. If the disk became slow, if the disk threw out or IOPS suddenly exploded, of course 4D becomes slower. So it is not about a single data, it's about collecting all this data together. And this is the nice idea here. So how does that work? This was what you will get. Now what you need to do to get it. Back to the slides. You need 3 parts. Prometheus, this is a time series data server. So the thing is doing nothing else as collecting data and storing them. Time series means it is not storing data for 5 years. It is usually storing data for a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and then trashing the old ones. There are other systems on the market which store data much longer, and as older the data are, as more compacted they are. You can choose whatever you want. You don't need to use that 3 in a combination. You can also use other time times is data servers. I played with InfluxDB, and at the end I decided for Prometheus. Prometheus, it's needing exporters. An exporter is a kind of driver which is collecting or feeding the data. It is working in a pull concept. It's not push, it is pull. This is a decision made from Prometheus. So the idea is the server is calling all the monitored services like Windows, Linux, printer, router, temperature sensor, or 4D, and collecting data. Usually every 15 or every 60 seconds. There's also a way to make a push service, but we don't recommend to do it. I will explain it later. This exporter is simply providing text. It's a very simple format. I will explain it in a minute. You can do it very easily yourself. But the important information is you need an exporter for every computer and on that computer for every service you want to monitor. And finally, the third part is Grafana. Grafana is the thing running the dashboard. So Prometheus also has a dashboard, but it's not as cool as Grafana. This really looks nice. And of course, it's fully responsive. You can run it on your computer. You can run it on an iPad. You can run it on a phone. It runs everywhere. So it allows quickly to check what's going on. So when you install it, this is the link you should have in the chat and on the website, the copy of the slides as PDF. So you have all the links. You don't need to note them. When you install Prometheus on Windows, it is installed as a folder, meaning there's no setup, there's no difficult installation, and more important, there's no difficult uninstall. It is similar as 4D. You have a folder, and if you try it now, and if you don't like it later, just take that folder, put it in the trash, finished. There's no need to set up a special virtual computer for that. There's no need to have special setups. It's a very simple installation, just a folder. Yeah, and best to use it on Windows or Linux. I prefer it on Windows because it allows that simple move to the trash installation. On Linux, I assume you would use a Docker container, and this makes it a little bit more complicated, except you are already using a lot of Docker containers. That's a different story. I did not try it on Mac. It is available on Mac, but you need to go through Homebrew. There's not direct, no application. You need to really compile, install it yourself. That's why I'm using Windows. And if you consider to use it at home or in a small company, it runs fine on the Raspberry Pi. So that's also a nice idea to have a Raspberry for €30 or $30 and just run everything there. So for launching, if you are still playing with it, testing it, the easy way to launch it is simple through the console, through the Windows terminal. So you give the path to the exe file where you installed it. I give always as an attribute the path to my setup file, to the configuration file, and a path where I want to have my storage. I said this thing is collecting data and storing data. So I want to have it in a specific folder, which I can later delete easily. Can back up if I want, don't need to back up if I want, up to you. The nice thing when you start it through a console for testing, in the testing period, you will do a lot of changes in this configuration. You will add more services, you will run the service in a different way, you are learning. For every time when you modify the configuration, you need to stop the application and restart it. So if you started it for testing in the console, you just press Ctrl+X to stop it and arrow up to start it again. So it's quite easily to stop and start. As soon as you are finished with testing and you go production, of course, you will run it as a service. Before we talk about service, first this configuration file. When you install it, you have a default configuration file in your directory. You just modify that one. And as always, when you modify files, don't forget to back up, make a copy up front. So if you destroy it, you can go back. The file starts with globals like scrap interval, checking interval, stuff like that. Just keep the default values. There's an alert manager. So it can also alert you about the service is not responsive. The server has not enough memory. The disk of the server is full. So you have a way to do automatic alerting. But this is not part of today's session. I'm only talking about metrics and showing metrics. You have rules what to do with data to automatically calculate with them. And you have finally the script configuration. So the real job. We start in the left upper area. So a first job for testing is create a job named Prometheus and test the service itself. So it's a funny thing where the collecting database has an exporter itself, and you can collect data about the running application, running database to see if the database is running fine. This is what I would recommend to do as a first step, because you should see if it's running or not. And you have a kind of feedback, everything is fine before you start with the next service. In the lower left corner, I have set a typical job how to do a Windows machine. I put as a script interval 15 seconds because I want to have the disk and the network in a finer interval. And again, you define a target. In the target, you might notice that it's the IP address or the host name and a port number. And the interesting thing in the idea of Prometheus is that we use a different port for every single service. So you might have 50 ports open just for Prometheus. Everything has its own port. The idea behind this, you do not expose the main service, and you are not using the main server, main web server to access data. That could open a security issue. You are always using a second port to give this data. This makes it more easy. I'm talking about that in a minute again. Yeah, and on the right side, I have an example for 4D. For 4D, I used 4 in letters and not as a number, because many services don't like to have a ticket as the first character. Scrape interval 60 seconds. As you can see, you can also add authentication. And I want to have my servers running reachable through the internet, so I don't want to have it without password. For the target, you can either give, it's in brackets, so it's a collection, like in 4D. With a comma, you can give 2 or 3 services in the same bracket. Or as I used here, I defined 2 different targets, both for the same job, because I wanted to have different labels. As you might remember when I showed it, the name of the 2 different dashboards was home and office, and not the IP address. If you don't give a label, you will see the IP address. I think a name is nicer. So it's just to give an idea how a setting looks like. Some parameters which are useful. I said, if you pass storage TSDB path, you can specify where the data is stored. Else it is sometimes deep in your user folder and you will never find it again. So I always give a path. You can specify the time, the interval or the storage time. This is by default 15 days, so a little bit more than 2 weeks. And it's now up to you if you want to, if you say 7 days is enough or you need 30 days. 7 days needs less disk and 30 days needs more disk, of course. Something very important to know, which I missed for nearly a week and spent endless time on the evenings. If you make anything wrong with this configuration file, it's simply not working. And it's difficult to find why. But we have a tool in the same folder where we have the application itself. So if you use the console path to prom tool, and when followed by check config, and then the path to the configuration file, it will answer with success or failure. And for failure, it will tell you what is wrong. And it could be a simple comma mistake or a quote sign missing or something like that, and nothing is working. So this checking tool is really important when you make a bigger configuration file. I would have saved some hours if I would have known that up front. So after a while, everything will work for you. You will go to production. So the next job is to make it automatic. So you need to run it as a service. Of course, if you run it on Linux, you install a service in a different way, but on Windows, many people have problems to install a service using Windows console. So that's a great tool, NSSM. I like the name. This is a non-sucking service manager. And this tool allows you to run any application as a service. Any means you can use it to run 40 server. You can use it to run a 40 single use application, a 40 client, whatever you want to run as whatever you can run as an application, you can run as a service without learning anything. So this tool has a user interface where you can click everything what you want, or you can control it through the terminal, meaning console, which I prefer because if I know once how to do it, and I was clever enough to write it down what I'm doing, I can install it on as many machines as I want, but just for copy paste the script. I do not need to make the setup manually. So here 3 examples, or with 3 lines I need to install the service for myself. Install Prometheus, this is the name of the service, the path of the application to run. The second part sets the parameters for the service. In my case, the config file and the storage path. And finally, I set the application directory. And the service is finished. You just need to launch it. There are more parameters if you want to do more things. So by example, if you would set up 4D server, I strongly recommend to set the username and user account to run for the server. Don't run for the server as a local service. The tool is really nice. So now it's finished. You run it. You want to test if it's working. So be slow. Let it run 15 minutes. Don't install it, test 5 seconds later and wonder that the data is empty. It needs to connect. In the browser, visit your local machine. 1990 is the address of Prometheus. And you will get something like that. And if you enter Go, something should happen. You should see some matrix. And if you go on with matrix and say execute, you should see data. So what happens? When I enter something here, it is doing automatically searching with autocomplete. Go are all the internal data coming from Prometheus. Go because it's written in the language Go. And as soon as you see data here, you know it's up and running. At least the Prometheus is running. It's nice to know. Yeah, you should get something like that. If that is failing, this is now the moment to stop and to use Google. There's a huge community to ask for help because you did nothing else when installing Prometheus. You did not install any other service. You don't install any exporter for Windows, for Linux, for 4D. This is just the basics. So everybody should be able to help you. Keep it simple, especially if you try to use it on a Mac and compile it yourself. Exporter. As said, an exporter is the job to collect data and provide the data. The polls run through HTTP or HTTPS, whatever you prefer. And the exporter is an HTTP server answering in a format. And the format is really simple. It's just text. It's not JSON, it's not XML, it's a simple text file. The syntax is simple. You are supposed to start with sooner or later, the first line with a number sign and the word help. Okay, this is an optional thing. This is the name of the first value, 4D status client total. You are free to define the beginning of the name yourself. The last word were kind of best practices. Total means this is a kind of number and it's the total. So the name should give an idea what it is, but you can give your own help text behind. So a user get an idea what this number could represent. When the next line should be type is exactly the same name of that value, of that metric. And for our data, it's usually gauge. Gauge means a number, 50%, 100%, 5,000 kilowatt, 20 megabyte, a number. And this number goes up and down. You could also use the type counter. Counter is only going up. A counter is typically if you have a paper counter from a printer, or if you have a counter from a router, how much bytes are transferred in and out. And the tool is automatically making the difference between the last counter and the current counter, and this produces the value. And if you are doing that yourself, you need to use Coach. So here we have an example for the first line. And it would be absolutely okay to say status client total 1. Then it would be just one number. But the interesting thing is I could use the same metric for different subtypes. Like here, say type used and type allowed. So I can share this metric to have different values. Typical usage is byte written and byte read. It's bytes sent, bytes received. Or as you saw in my query, I put all the queries in the same object. So it's easier to make a dashboard. So in 4D, we usually use counter or Coach. When you do something like that, when you are creating your own exporter, the number 1 rule is the line break is line fit. Without any discussion, it's only line fit. Don't use carriage return, don't use carriage return line fit. In no case mix it, use line fit. Else it will simply fail. It will just not work. This also cost me some time. So as said, normally it's running through pull if it's asking for data. Let's make it easy to use. But if you want to monitor your customer servers, it means that you need to open a port on every firewall for every customer. And especially with smaller customers using consumer routers, it could be challenging. While Prometheus is recommending to use pull, we have a tool named push gateway with reverse it. So meaning your server can push the data out. This is usually easier from a customer point to your server. I don't go in details. Here's a link to an article from the website describing how pushing works. So we are now at the moment that Prometheus works for you, but you don't have any other exporter. If you're running on Windows, the first exporter you will use is the Windows exporter. Here's the link to download it. Strange enough, this is now an installer. So this is now you need to run through installer, and it will automatically run it as service. I guess they did that because you installed Prometheus just once, but you run the Windows exporter on all your Windows computers you want to monitor, and it could be many in a larger organization. I personally modified this service, so I don't let it run how it was automatically installed. If you don't know how to modify an existing service, I gave here the commands to enter in the console. Remember, to modify a service, you need to run the console as an administrator. I modify whether I want to have a log format, a log file, which helps at least at the beginning, and I want to have a config file. And in this config file, I modified the collectors and I removed some. So removed some means also you can add some. And on GitHub, sorry, I think I can click here. Yeah. On GitHub, we have an explanation about all the collectors they offer, and that's really huge. If you have Active Directory running, you can collect data about it. You can collect data about DNS server, DHCP server, Exchange, Microsoft File Server, Hyper-V, a lot about things about .NET, SQL Server, and everything which has check marks is enabled by default, and everything else is missing. So I removed for me the services because the service list was extremely long. I have a lot of services I don't care. So I don't want to waste disk space for that. This is why I removed it. And there's an interesting thing, text file. So text file means that if you have some data to add, you can simply add this data in a text file. Here's an example how to do that. And the exporter is collecting them beside. So if you don't want to have your own exporter just because you want to have the fan speed or the temperature of a device, you can collect it beside with other stuff. As usual, readmes make sense to read. So don't forget the readmes. You can learn a lot. The collectors. So second step, I changed mine to 50 seconds. I gave the port. And when you set it up in the Prometheus config, you need to restart Prometheus. Don't forget that. Every time you modify that YML file, restart. Wait a while when it collects data. And when we go back to the setup screen, and here we have status and targets. And this is something really important when you start using Prometheus. You can see all your services or all your exporters. And if all of them are green with up, it's working. So if it's red and down, you have a problem. A problem could be that the server is not running or that the matrix file is wrong. And talking about matrix, this is the Windows shop. Here you can see always the endpoint where it is checking for matrix. And if you click on it, you can see, as I just said, this is the file in the concept help type, all the values, help type, all the values, and so on. And this is the data what the Windows exporter is delivering. So it's easy to see. Yeah, and now Windows should be green. And if it's not green, again, now it's time to Google, because something serious is wrong and you are doing something very simple where you should find a lot of people in the community to help. If you do the same thing on Linux, just use the Linux exporter. It's named Node Exporter. And you can also use that on Mac if you are using Homebrew or on Raspberry. And it's collecting more or less the same kind of data. So when the exporter is running for a while, like it's doing now for me, and I can enter here Windows. What example did I have? I can get a number and I can click on graph and I even get a graph. So Prometheus is already providing you with graphs. At least you get some graph. It's not nice, it's not colorful, it's not wonderful, but at least you already get some data. So if you don't know what a matrix is about and you are just testing and playing around, there's no need to add everything to Grafana. You can get a first idea what's happening here. You can here set the time, like 1 hour, 3 hours. You can move in the time backwards. So that thing can also do some stuff. So enter some characters, click on graph, change the interval if you want, click execute. Finally, Grafana. So Grafana, we are using it here to visualize the data coming from Prometheus. As said, it is Grafana can get data from a lot of resources. You can even write your own data time series data server in 4D. I just don't see a point. This is existing, it's working, so I'm using it. You can run Grafana on Windows, Linux, Mac, or again on a Raspberry Pi. This is the download page. On Windows, same story. You download a zip, you expand the zip, and then you can run it from the folder. So same benefit when you don't know if you really want to use it. If you're just playing with it, download it, play with it. If you don't like it, just put it in the trash. No installation, no deinstallation. This makes it really easy. And it was the reason why I decided to use it on Windows and not on my Linux machine. And again, use NSSM to run it as a service. When you are finished, everything runs fine. When you installed it, this is the IP address, the port number used by Grafana. And you go to configuration. In configuration, you click on add data source and you select Prometheus. In Prometheus, you can in the setup you can keep all the default data. Normally, I expect now that you run Grafana on the same computer as Prometheus. You have a default port. You have no authentication setup. So as long as you used all the defaults, just adding will work. When you click on dashboard and select Prometheus, that's only for testing. This is a dashboard you can add. It's quite easy to add, and you should see some data. This is only to know that Grafana is working. As soon as you see Grafana working, you can delete this dashboard again. Again, because if it fails now, you know that you did something wrong with adding the data source. And as this was the only step, it is now still easy to find help. I don't expect that you have problems, but it's always easy to have steps. So if it's running, you need your first real dashboard. Let's now imagine you have an exporter running on Mac or Linux. You use the standard node dashboard. And in Grafana, to add a dashboard, you click on the add sign, and you usually just enter a number of a predefined dashboard. And for Mac and Linux, it is 6126 for whatever reasons. Enter it, click on load, and finished. Will work. What you will get, I can show you. And you will get we will get this one. And here you should see the instances running. So if you have only one server, you will see just one. If you have 10, you should see 10. I assume that you will start with one. If you started with Windows, it's a little bit more complicated. For whatever reasons, the dashboard is not fitting to the exporter. One of them has changed the names and nothing worked. I think I searched 2 days before I found the hit on the website, and I'm sorry, I did not remember what website described how to use it. So I needed to make it myself without being able to give the credit. So not install the dashboard with numbering, but download the JSON file from here. Open it with a text editor and simply replace everything starting with WMI underscore with Windows underscore in the complete document. So by example here, the original name is WMI underscore CPU time, and I replace Windows CPU time. Just search and replace, save it, then import it, and finish. It's working. And now you will get this one. And if you search for, I searched for Windows dashboards, and I found several different ones, and all of them was using WMI. So it was a little bit frustrating for me. So if it is working, next thing is to make it in 4D. This is the idea of it day. So in 4D, I have here an example what I deliver back if you are using my matrix exporter. Of course, you can write your own, but if you start with mine, I return how much clients currently are connected, how many are maximum allowed by the license, how many processes are running, and typical stuff about memory. So the question is, how do I do it? And I'm doing it quite simple by using process 4D text and using a text file on disk. Process 4D text, I think I said it at least twice at summits, is for me the most powerful 4D command because it can do really everything. It is an interpreter in a compiled application. You can write code on the fly. You can enter the code and text field and when executed. You can produce smart templates. You can create, I used process 4D text to create XML files before 4D was supporting XML, meaning version 6. I used it to create JSON files before 4D was able to produce JSON. I even used it to create Excel and Word files because they are just XML. You can do anything with it. And we enhance it drastically over the years. So what I'm here using is the 4D code tag, which we added with 18 something, allowing me to have full 4D code. So I test this code usually in 4D, then copy paste it in my template and just put the tag for the code around. You need to know that in process 4D tags, you have your own local variables, you have everything on your own. This is a kind of own process running in an interpreter. So I'm defining my local variables. I'm defining some arrays and filling them with get memory statistics. And as you can see, you can even use dot notation. It's quite cool. And when I using 4D text, I add the values. Finished. The same for count task, the same for the array elements. And when you run that with process 4D text or as HTML, you get just the result. When I think doing it here and not in a 4D method is, at least for me, I'm playing, when I work with matrix, I'm playing a lot. I'm getting the need of more matrix, different way, and I don't want to recompile my application every time. And I don't want to restart it. By restarting, I'm losing my matrix. I want to have it in the running application. And that is when I think with process 4D text. Yeah, and here another example, a little bit more complicated. Here for my queries, I want to know the top 20 queries, both in time and in how many. And this is an example what I return. And as you can see for queries, the real query, not with parameter used, so not like search ID equal to 5, but how many searches I did for ID, or how many searches I did for timestamp and value, I think the English word, and target. So you can see combined searches, you see some small and bigger ones, and I did 5 here in the second line here, 5 queries for these 2 fields in combination. And all this data is in 4D. It's all coming from the database measures. So sorry, this is a little bit small now. I know it depends on your screen size. If it's too small, take a look at the PDF or in the code directly. Again, I'm using 4D code to produce all my data. I'm using get database measures. Get database measures returns a huge object. When I'm fitting this object, I'm taking some parts out, I'm recalculating them, and producing my own object with push commands and so on. And as you can see, the complete block is just 4D code for all the features we have in 4D. And the result is when like that. And when I'm the next below that, I'm using 4D text again to run, check if data is existing or not existing. If it's existing, I take the value. If it's not existing, I'm taking 0. And I'm using what you can see here at the bottom, 4D each, which is a new tag we introduced in 19, which makes it really, really easy in process 4D text to loop through collections or even entity selections. And there is even more code to go through the cache read bytes. I wrote all that code because in the beginning I had too many lines with 0. So if you have 100 tables, but only 20 tables are used, you don't want to see all that 0 numbers. You want to see the most used tables usually. So I'm removing everything which is empty or not used enough to keep it smaller. Okay, so that was the exporter. I will show you the code in a minute. Again, if you want to create exporters, either use process 4D text or write your own 4D code in a method. Whatever you do, always use line feeds as a line breaker. Never carriage return. You can answer to a request by using 4D action, SHTML. You can use one web connection, whatever you want. You can use the main 4D server or component. As you might know, starting with 19, you might run as many web servers as you want. So one 4D server could run 5 web servers on 5 different ports. The idea here is if you have a different port, it is completely exclusive, it's isolated. You can only host that part, nothing else. You can have different passwords, different features, there's no risk to expose data of a main application. GitHub. Brand, do I have 5 minutes to talk about GitHub?
Sure, absolutely.
Some people ask me how to find stuff. So Google is a good thing to search stuff. Enter GitHub, enter 4D. And now we have some magic words like, you know, Keisuke? Here you find his GitHub account. And if you don't know it, you need to learn it. Repositories, 516, he's the man, nobody can beat him. And you find things for anything. So if you search for a plugin, a component, and you don't remember his last name, I know, Keske is the first name, many people are confused. First search GitHub 4D Kesugi, or Miyako, if you remember that one. You don't find him with Magic Guy, not yet. Or you might want to search for Vincent. Vincent will be the speaker of the next 4DMethod call. Sorry, I thought maybe I not was allowed and supposed to say that, but this guy is also crazy. Nobody knows him. He's one of the hidden gems. He's doing all that SVG work. So if you ever had a question, a really tricky, difficult question in the forum about SVG, he answered. And if you look through repositories, you find a lot of things about 4D-pop. And I think many of you heard about 4D-pop. This one is new, 3 hours ago, I missed that. SVG with classes, this could be cool. Okay, this is something to look later. This is new.
his work with classes is mind blowing. I mean, it's it really you need to settle down and you need a moment to see what he's doing, but it's always extremely enlightening.
Yeah, so it makes sense from time to time to browse through GitHub just to see what's going on. 4D-pop Git. This is included in 4D, a full Git client. I think there's a picture inside. Yeah. So if you work with source tree or other tools, you have it now inside 4D. You see all your commits, you see all your code changes, you can follow what happened. It's all included. It's just a window in 4D. If you're starting with Git, take a look. He wrote code so long ago. Pop, SQL, passport. Classes. Classes was written 2 years ago. Before we had in 4D classes, Vincent invented classes on his own using the formula object. This was really super cool work 2 years ago. Now it's easier to use classes from 4D. But it makes sense to go for that. So this was Vincent. Another one is Eric. Eric is another hidden guy. He is the main author of 45 iOS. So this is why there's so much iOS code in his repositories. But he is also a guy doing object-oriented development in a different way. He loves development patterns. He loves theoretical ways how to do best practices. And you find a lot of stuff around here, how to do better coding with classes. He's sometimes a little bit far away from 4D. Let me try if I find it. Classic code with classes. I found last week somewhere he wrote a 4D code to analyze 4D classes to show them on a class tree. So most of us have 3 or 5 classes. So if you already have 200 and you are using inheritance, you can really visualize your own 4D classes in an inheritance tree. Cool work.
Oh, that's nice.
So it also makes sense to browse through it. When one is 4D. 4D GitHub is the main company repository. Some people ask, where do we find the newest plugin SDK? It's here. Some people ask about when we start a request log. What does all the strange numbers means? It's here. So here you find all the numbers in the request log. And if you're wondering what is 11,05048 collection to data, this is not the names you have in 4D. This is our internal names, how we transfer data. But at least that names helps you more than a number. If you really want to go low level, you can even have a low level SQL protocol. But you also find all our libraries, meaning label editor, 4D Write Pro, SVG, report, the components. All the components we publish as part of 4D, you can find it in the source code. And we're supposed to have branches, so you can select which one you want. That was 4D, and the last one is 4D Depot. And in 4D Depot, you have all the how do I examples. And because this became so big, we have even a list. And here, by example, you can have a list by 4D version. So you want to see what works, what is new in 18R4 or by theme. And here you can see all the how do I's and examples for 4D View Pro or 4D Write Pro or email or list box or order or whatever. So, but it was not what I wanted to show. What I wanted to show was my name. So I can also find myself. I'm not really as often publishing as the others, but I have some. Usually things I talk about in conferences or code I want to share, and one of them is Prometheus. And here you can download the exporter. I described here how to start it, how to do it yourself if you don't want to do it in an external component. What you need to rewrite if you want to run it with V18. So you can run it in 18, but when you need to rewrite 40 each because this is missing. This is not magic work, it's just some work. How you need to set it up and what you will get. And I uploaded here also my dashboard for Grafana. So when you start using it, the easiest is to use my dashboard. And then you modify it as you want. Okay. So while I'm in that, before forgetting, Brent mentioned before that he's using so many components and it's so hard to maintain all these components and to compile and do that. This is a common problem. So when I'm finished with a and by the way, I forget, sorry. This component is a project mode component. If you are still in binary and you missed that, a binary application can run a project mode component. A project mode application can run a binary component. You can mix them as you want. So don't be scared because this is project mode. It's just so much more easy to publish. And of course, I also want to publish it compiled for Silicon. So when I do new code, in most of my work, I have method named build. You can name it as you want. And this is doing my build. To make it easier for myself to remember after a while and make it easier for you, I put some comments up front, how to do the setup, to select the right Xcode, to make how to put your certificate in the Apple keychain, what you need to do when Apple made an update to Xcode, that you should launch it once to get the message that Xcode wants to install some components, that you might need to remember to log in from time to time in developer.apple.com to realize you have expired certificates, or Apple is requesting you to validate your new contract. If anything of that is missing, either signing or notarizing is failing, not only with that code, but only if you use it, by example, from 4D build. So what this thing is doing, it is using a class I wrote, which is part of it. It runs compile. It runs if it was successful build. If it was successful, it zips it. If it was successful, it notarizes it. If it was successful, it wait for Apple for the message. If notarizing is finished, check if it's success or failure. If it was success, we stable it. Finally, I committed to Git and I'm finished. So this is my way how I compile, public, work on components. I execute one method. It's quite comfortable. And if you want to see how the build works, just go in classes. I only have here one class, and this is all the code for build. It does everything. It modifies with the folder, with this, with XML. It is doing with zip. It is uploading to Apple with Xcode to notarize. 190 lines, not even so much. And
nice.
Using class, it is quite easy. So if you write components, take a look on that, modify it as you want. If you find something to improve, don't forget to share. Yeah, this was only about the build thing where we discussed. Here you find it. So as I said, I use it as a component, put it in the component folder, in on server startup, check if a component is here and if yes, start it. This is launching its own web server. It is launching a web server on this port. Sorry, should not click. Launching a web server on a given port here. You can also specify a HTTPS port. It gives a username and a user password, and it launches it. It's finished. The benefit is it's a separated web server. So this web server runs preemptive, even if your main server would still be cooperative. It is isolated. You cannot access data from the outside. You cannot have an URL where you can get other data, which you don't want to expose. For me, it's a better security, but it requires v19. If you don't want to use the component, or if you are using v18, you can simply use that matrix as HTML file, which I'm using. I'm using it with process4d text. You can simply put it in your on web connection folder. And then you can call it with matrix.shtml, and then it will execute it automatically. Or if you don't want, you use the on web connection. You'd invite your own keyword. The default keyword for Prometheus is /matrix. So I'm using here /matrix as an example. If you get a call for /matrix, load your matrix file wherever you have it, here in the current resource folder, process4d text, and send it as blob. Finished. But as said, if you are not using 19, have a little bit of fun to rewrite 40 each. You know, it's a price to use old versions. Small work. My GitHub repository contains the Grafana folder, a Grafana dashboard. To edit, simply add this block, job name 4D, interval 60 seconds, user and password if you are using one. If you don't use one, you can skip it, and give the targets. And to test, simply use your own IP address /matrix. This is what I'm using. If you're using something else, use your own, and you should see the data. To repeat that, if I go here in status, in targets, and search for 4D, and click on that, you should get something of that, like that. And here you see I was even too lazy to remove empty lines. This was more work when saving 20 bytes. It was not work for me. If you get that, it's working fine. If you don't get it, it's something wrong. No, here. If you write your own exporter, sooner or later you will make a mistake. I can guarantee that. It happens so often to me. And if you try it, Prometheus will just fail and service is down. And you can get crazy by that. But there's a cool way to do it, to check it. So, no, here. You get your matrix as a file, you do a right click and save it on disk as a text file. So you have all that thing as a text file. When on Windows, you open the terminal or PowerShell. By the way, if you don't know PowerShell, it's really time to learn. PowerShell is so much better than the old console. It's so powerful. And if you wonder why I'm always using the word terminal, yes, Microsoft ships a terminal application since I think 2 years. And if you use the terminal application from Microsoft on Windows, it is so easy if you switch from Microsoft to Mac to Linux and back. You can use commands like ls, cd, all with Linux commands. You don't always need to, in your mind, switch between Unix and Windows naming. You can finally use the same stuff what you use on Mac also on Windows. So I love terminal. So cut is a command to list the text or to put the content of a text file in the terminal. With the pipe characters are redirected to the prom tool. Remember, prom tool, we needed it already to check the YML file, the configuration. But if I check matrix, not check configuration, it will check my matrix file. And this is the matrix I just passed in. And when I get an error, why my matrix file is bad. For me, it was usually a carriage return instead of a line feed, but you might have other errors. So this line helps you to understand why your matrix is bad. So this was the summary how I'm using Grafana and what matrix I'm using. You might have more matrix to use. If you take a deeper look in database measures, you might find stuff like what indexes are used for sorting. You find information like what index is not used at all. You know, you could have an index never used. If an index is not used, it's only wasting CPU time, hard disk space, memory. So it could be interesting to learn about. I did not include that because I made my homework already. You could search for logged records. There's a command in 4D which returns you an array of all logged records from all tables, from all users. So I did that for myself 2 years ago. When I published the server admin window, do I have a screenshot? I don't know. With some luck, I have a screenshot, but maybe not. No, here that button logged records, but there's no screenshot of it. I'm sorry. In that button, I display a list of all records in a hierarchical list box. So you can either sort by table name or by username, and you can see what user is logging how many records in which table. And by double clicking a record, you can even see the content of a record. So I used that to for old code, which was not using order, to find methods where I forgot to unload records. So when somebody is, and I can see that if somebody is logging an invoice item, and also logging an, don't know, a completely external table, I forgot to unload it. So by monitoring several times per day about who is logging what, I learned a lot about my own mistakes. So why not including that in the matrix? To have a list how many records are logged and how many from which table or what user. Whatever you need, put it in. Scrap time or timing. Let's say you have an application which is creating invoices, and invoicing is the main job of your application. Why not measuring the time that invoice creation process takes and add this as a value here? Whatever you do, what your customers, what your users are doing all the time, find 2, 3, 5 things and measure them and include it. The idea is, if normally order processing takes 2 seconds, and you see that it's suddenly taking 5 or 8 seconds, it is just a question of minutes before the first customers will call your tech support saying something is wrong. If you see that upfront, you can try to investigate upfront and hopefully fix it before the customer complains. So use some standard metrics, which makes sense for your own application. As said, we did not talk at all about Prometheus alerting or Grafana alerting. That's the topic on its own. There are a huge amount of tutorial in the web, search for them. If you want to learn more, use YouTube. YouTube is a great source for kind of learning videos. Search for Grafana. As we discussed before this call started, don't use YouTube to search for Prometheus. You will find different things, not really related. And don't do it with small kids beside you. A better word is Prometheus tutorial. Yeah, I already mentioned that the exporter source include my build class, which could help. And that's it, finished.
Oh, that was
Any
awesome.
question? I see there's a lot in the chat. Are there questions?
Yeah, there was one from Kirk coming back to the not sucking service manager NSSM. Does that interact with or affect the register as a service standard feature for 4D servers, or is that just completely independent?
It's independent. You cannot use NSSM to modify, edit any kind of service which was installed without NSSM. So this was the reason why I used the console to modify a service installed from an installer. So this register as a service command in 4D server We have different opinions about that. Some people in the company say this is the biggest mistake we made. We should never have included it. And some people say it still helps. So the mistake is, it is against Microsoft best practice. An application should not install itself. An installer should install a service. An installer is running as an administrator, so it has all the rights needed to install something. An application like 4D server should never run as an administrator, so it can never install itself. So you might execute it with a right click, run as an admin, when it can install a service, but when it's behaving already differently. And finally, if you install it just by default, we don't know what user you want. We don't know what kind of service attributes you want. So in 90%, it's wrong. So when we added this command, I think it was 1995 or 1996, something like that. So at that time, the security rules for Microsoft was extremely different from these days. So at that time, you could run a service as a local service. A local service doesn't need a passport, does not need a user. So this is why we used it. A local service, as the name says, is supposed to do local things. The network is not local. So a local service cannot access a network printer. It cannot access a file printer. It should not even access any other network things. And 4D server is a network server. So what you really should do is, when you install 4D as a service, to later assign a user. And best is the same user which is when you use to run 4D server, so it has the same folders, the same user the same user directory, and so on. And when to change things like automatic startup and stuff like that. But you could use by default NSSM to install 4D server as a service and don't use the menu at all. So on the long run, not sure when, so not this year, obviously. Either 2022, if you're really fast, or 2023, we want to reach a way when we don't need, let's start, name it like that. We first want to reach a state where we don't need a user interface for the server anymore. And as a second phase, we don't want to provide a user interface anymore. So 4D server should run headless. If you followed the blog, you have seen a lot of blog posts for headless usage and a lot of improvements. We are adding more and more features for that. We started also with admin tools included in a browser. What we miss is to do all the things when the server is not running in the browser, meaning you start a 4D server, but you need to enter a license number. You start a 4D server, but you want to restore a backup because the server crashed. You want to do things where you're not able to run 4D servers. So can you have a web server if the web server is not running? And now you might understand why we produced that strange feature to have a component adding a second web server. We need a web server inside 4D without the application running. And then we can create an admin server. So this is all on the road to it. And at the final end, idea is to run 4D server only headless and to make all the administrative stuff in a browser. But this is 2022, 2023, I don't know. I found later, can you write 4D code to send custom matrix to Prometheus? Yeah, a lot, all the days. I think I answered that later already. Data of different clients, where do you store the data? I don't store data at all. All this data is stored in Prometheus. That's the idea. Prometheus is a matrix storage. It's what we name time series server. This answers for questions. Everything comes from handleware. Meanwhile, I answered some questions. I'm not sure about open administration window as this is running on the client, but I don't expect that we will enhance it so much.
I use it all the time, so I don't have to connect to 4D server. And on the client, I can just bring up the server window, and my database administrators can. And I thought this is and I know there are using the web server, and people have REST interfaces to mimic the server administration window. But I always thought, why is that better or preferred than just using open administration window command from the client? Why is it preferred, or is it maybe they're both the same? Really, I'm puzzled by that.
No, I think open administration window is legacy. It is for people used to work like that. The browser is faster to start. You want to kill a process. You want to check something. You want to look into something. This works super fast if you just need to launch a browser. If you need to launch a client, it takes longer. Now I'm talking against 4D. We had some challenges to explain an administrator why he need to purchase a 4D client license only to check a process. For a browser, you don't need a license. So it just fits better in the modern world. But as you saw maybe a second before, my own administration window is pure 4D code. So it runs as a 4D dialog. You can use what you like. I was talking about the server itself.
Okay.
The server itself is running as a best practice on Microsoft world to run as a service, meaning headless. And also on Mac, which is currently already possible with 18 and 19, you can run 4D server headless, meaning 4D servers running, but it's not even visible in the toolbar, in the dock. So the end user will not even see it. It's running somewhere behind. And that's what fits much better in the modern world.
I guess maybe I don't ever run open administration window, or I never tell people leave it open for a long period of time. Open it, check, need to check, and then close it. Because I know it's probably resource intensive. There's a lot of network traffic generated. Maybe using a web interface is a more efficient way of monitoring the server. So I can kind of understand that, but it's so easy to use one command and you get everything there, drop users, all those things are available.
Yeah, as said, on the client, it's not a problem. The problem for us is at the server. On the server, the server is supposed to deliver data and to execute business logic. The user interface on both Mac and Windows, there's a rule from our operating system. Only one process can use the user interface, and this is the main process. So, and the main process is the process running in 4D, all the legacy code. If you still have a trigger which is not cooperative, if you still have a method which is not preemptive, all that is running in that first core. And this thing is also doing all these charts in the dialog. This is stupid, is slowing down everything else. So Gerald questions was integrate with different server data into one dashboard. And no, this is handled from Grafana. So that is a nice thing. Grafana, you can, when you create a dashboard, for every single item in the dashboard, you can specify a data source. And the data source could be for the server, could be Windows, could be Linux, could be my power usage, whatever you want. It is all in one dashboard with the data sources. And it's really easy.
So would you recommend basically siloing the different parts of your API or the different parts of your web services in separate web serving instances now moving forward, or
no, just more work? I don't see a benefit, except we had two reasons to create this feature. One reason was that we wanted to solve that admin problem. And another reason was, by the way, I'm not sure if it was in Washington or Portland, also a US customer talking to me at the summit. The problem was 90% of his traffic in the web comes through quite simple calls. So not really complex stuff, but less than 10% comes through really complicated code running from the backend guys. So the customer was using easy thing, the backend was really complicated thing. The backend was producing, you could ignore the traffic, but the end users was producing all the traffic. But because the backend code was so complicated, he said, I would need 5 years to rewrite that to preemptive. I have no chance. This is so much work. I need to have a way to write some things preemptive and some things cooperative. So his request was to produce a web server being able to do both.
I see.
The problem is that on the computer, when you launch a new process, you can decide to launch it preemptive or cooperative. You need to decide when you launch it. As soon as it's running, you cannot switch.
Right.
So when you launch a new 4D process, we can check what process is doing. We know it upfront, and then can launch it this way or that way. If a web service, a SOAP call goes in, we already know the method assigned to the SOAP call. So we can have SOAP calls cooperative and preemptive at the same time. But when a web process goes in, they all come through on web connection and web authentication. And when you have your own dispatcher and they have no idea what goes on.
I see.
They have no idea what this thing will call later. So this is why either the complete web server is preemptive or the complete web server is cooperative. And with this trick now we have 2 web servers. So it could make sense to spend the time to split that work, to have cooperative and preemptive at the same time.
Makes total sense.
For 2 very different user groups.
Yeah.
That could be a reason. For normal work, no, it makes much more sense to first to have a good thinking about security and checking of your system and spend the time to become preemptive. It's anyway the goal since 16.
It's analogous to using components to jump to project earlier or to jump to preemptive code earlier. Same thing with the web server. You can separate the preemptive code and with one web server or another. Good tip. Well, this is it seems like an incredibly capable jumping off point for most people, because everybody's needs for the dashboard will be different within their own application and industry. I mean, I can't imagine how cool it would be if you have some manufacturing data or something like that that you can display alongside with all of your other server performance data. Sky's the limit at that point.
In the beginning, I started to try to create the charts myself, using high charts, using Google Charts, using all that kind of tools, and it worked. But I said that my origin was home automation, and I did not knew what data I want to search. I did not knew what data I want to analyze. I just got more and more sensors delivering data, and I had no real clue where to go with that. So Grafana allowed me to play with that stuff. And when I started playing with it, I said, okay, I need more data here, and when I can do more here, and I got new inspirations and ideas by doing so.
Have you had customers already take these examples and set them up in their own environment?
I had a call with a guy from Europe, which I recommended to do it. He's a software editor with many customers outside, and it could be a server to collect data. Usually we discuss that always when something is not working.
Yeah.
So that if we would have set that up 4 weeks ago, we could now compare it worked, it fails, what happens in between.
Right. Yeah.
And daily business in different time. But as said, the main idea came from Sweetwater Music, which is using it extremely heavily. So every time when we talk about an issue, they are showing me a chart and say, here, look, see, yesterday, 2:15 it started.
It's always nice to have that before the problem happens. Yeah.
Yeah, but even if you have it when the data happens, that the journals might still existing, the log files might existing, because you are overriding that stuff. So if you realize it early enough, you can still fetch your things. If you wait till somebody calls tech support and it goes up the row, and 3 days later somebody talks to you, it's too late.
Well, if anybody if anyone is here or who oh, there's Jeff Kane. Nice.
Yeah, could you download it and share it? This is I'm quite sure this is my most favorite screenshot from him.
Let's see.
This is how he made me so jealous. So this is an example where he has the computer, the network, and the database and everything on a single screen.
That's just insane.
Yeah, and when I talked to him some years ago, he said that they have in the administration room don't remember, 65-inch screen or something like that, with that as a live display. Thing I did not show it. In the upper right, there's a pop-up menu where you can say refresh every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds. So it is automatically refreshing, and the administration team sees what's going on. 930 now. I also saw one with 970. We are all waiting when we reach the 1,000 users. And you can see over the day how the user goes up and down, and I love it.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, but I think the heavy one, no, the upper, beside that 913, you can see the CPU usage. It's more heavy than my 4-core computer.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I said when I saw that, I got the feeling I want it.
That's awesome. Now it'll be I'd be very interested to see if anyone takes these examples, which I hope you do, and set this Prometheus and Grafana dashboard up in your own environment. Do share. There's a discuss 4D article on this meeting, if nothing else, or on comment somewhere on the blog. Definitely share your dashboards, because I personally would like to stay motivated to make this myself and make it easy, make it easier for myself to get this going, because I think once you have it, it's going to be just insanely powerful for introspection.
If you're a graphical oriented guy, if you spend some time in YouTube to watch about Grafana dashboards, you get a lot of ideas what you can do. I'm more of a number guy, so I did not spend so much time making my own stuff nice.
One of the metrics is entity selection count, 32,000 of them. What's the value of knowing that there's 32,000 entity selections on the server?
It's only a debug
pretend
number.
You didn't pretend you didn't see that.
No, it's a debug number. Imagine you have 25 developers working parallel to rewrite a 25 years old classic application to order. You are producing much more data and traffic on the servers normally, and you might run into some bugs in 4D. And as in the past, we sometimes search for memory leaks. We are here searching for something which could be an entity selection leak. Yes or no, we don't know. Okay. And as this is an important metric for them, we are logging it. This is the idea. If you have something you don't know, you're logging it. When I started with Matrix 10 years ago, before we rewrote the memory manager in V16, we had a lot of problems with fragmentations of cache. So usually the cache was going up and down. And in that time, we discussed a lot if this is a concept problem, is this is standard behavior, it's a bug, it's the way it works. So we needed to understand. So an important thing was to collect metrics, analyze them, learn, and then improve.
So speaking to the memory leaks, for the bug fix list per release, is it dependable that memory leaks would be reported in the bug fix list, or do those sometimes get fixed and not be reported as bugs?
It depends. We report in the bug fix list contains bug fixes which were found because a customer or an employee reported a bug with a clear title, like if I for every using of that command 2 bytes are lost or some bytes are lost. So we have a bug for that. But it could also be that the bug was found by our engineering. We are running a lot of automatic machines. So every night we have a build chain building 4D, and then running a lot of automatic tests with the just builds to see if there are any issue. Mm-hmm. And we have a set of machines at Amazon used to produce load tests and different ideas. And if you find something rare, it will never go in the bug fix list. Because it is usually fixed before we even have a clear bug number and bug name.
I see.
So
Okay.
it depends how it was found. We sometimes have found memory leaks by adding new features where we could take much more advantage of a command and realized, oh, so far there was never a need to execute with 100,000 times per hour. But if you do so, you have a memory leak. And so we find that by adding new features. But if customers report memory problems, we are in the bug fix list.
Okay.
Honestly, it was a long time ago where they really had a memory leak in 4D. Most of the time when customers contacted me, it was a memory leak in their code. So just to use that call, all the old commands we had in 4D before version 11 are dangerous commands, meaning commands where you need to be careful. All the new stuff is we take care of you. So meaning when you do something like when you open an XML file, pass the XML file,
Right.
and you forget to close it, you have lost between 1 kilobyte and 1 megabyte. So if you're just opening XML, never close them, it's just a question of time till your server dies. If you are receiving SOAP commands and you forget to free the parameters, it's the same as the XML is open. If you use SVG and forget to close, same story. If you open a document and forget to close, you have 20, 30 bytes lost. If you create, which is my favorite, if you create menu bars or a menu in a menu bar, and every time when you enter a form, you create the menu bar again, you have just created a memory leak because you were supposed to release the old one. If you create a hierarchical list and forget to clear it, you create a memory leak. And this is super great if you have hierarchical list, meaning with sublists. So that is a clear list with a star to delete all of them. If you forgot them, memory leak. A lot of ways.
Yeah. No, there's certainly a lot of pitfalls we all look out for along the way.
I have a Tomas, I have a question.
Keep it for a minute. Last sentence, sorry. When you think there's a memory leak, when you're unsure, there's an easy way to go. So use Grafana and my exporter, use just your own code, doesn't matter. The command is get memory statistics. And with memory statistics, you need to compare the used physical memory with the virtual memory. And even better if you have in that list also the cache. So your server starts to use cache. So let's say you granted 10 gigabytes, so the cache will go up to 10 gigabyte. The physical memory should be a little bit above. So if you have 10 gigabyte, you might have 11 gigabyte, 12 gigabyte physical memory. Normally, a server does not need a lot of memory beside the cache. If you have a lot of variables, a lot of users, a lot of processes, it could be more. But with the user, it goes up and down. But if you see that the virtual memory is only increasing while the physical memory stays at the same level, and the virtual memory never goes down while the physical goes up and down, then you have a memory leak. So this is a clear signal for virtual going up, physical stays or goes up and down, but virtual only goes up, it's a memory leak. And when this tool could help you by getting this matrix once a minute, or if you store it in a text file even once every 10 seconds, to get a better understanding if that memory leak goes like slowly up or like that. So when you might have a chance to say, oh, it goes up every 10 minutes, I have a statistic running every 10 minutes. Or you might see that it always goes up when you receive a new email and you are passing it or whatever. So you have a way to match it. Because if you call our tech support and say you have memory leak, it's difficult to help. If you say, if a memory leak with this command, we can help you to analyze it and can try to reproduce. So now the question, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Tim asked a question and I stopped him.
I just heard you say, when you're talking about memory leaks, you mentioned clearing parameters for SOAP calls. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And I've got some systems that do a lot of SOAP calls still today. Wrote it back when it came out. I've not experienced any memory leaks, but I don't know if I'm clearing anything in these SOAP calls because they're all local variables that are being.
if you used the 4D web, what was the name? 4D Web Service Assistant, and the Web Service Assistant have created the kind of proxy method for you.
Yeah.
It automatically added the code to clear. So you don't need to do it yourself. But if you missed that, it is fun. So the command name of the command is web service get result. With that command, you get all the parameters, and you are supposed in the last line of your code to call this command with a third parameter and a star. And the star is clearing up everything. It is in English, the manual says free up memory. And if you miss to free up memory, you are producing memory leak. So,
but in Orda and newer language, that's.
I see what you're saying. Okay, the web service get result command include the asterisk as a last parameter. Okay, yeah, I'm doing that. So that's why I've never had any issues. Okay.
Yeah, but let's say if doing a code refactoring, code review, you are deleting by accident the last line, and suddenly it happens.
All right, and what Brent, to check on that. That's all. Thank you.
What Brent was just saying, all the new things we started is with ref counting. So when you create a picture, when you create an object, when you do a collection, all that kind of things, we have internally a reference counter, and every time you assign it to something, we increment and decrement. And if the ref counter reaches 0, we run sooner or later in a garbage collector, which is throwing everything out. This makes working much easier. It makes debugging much more difficult because it could be that the memory is still full because the CPU is running heavily, so the garbage collector comes later. And the cleaning or the clearance of memory is not happening in the same moment when you get rid of the object. This makes it a little bit more complicated. And this is the reason why we do not have a I would say it in English, a destructor, no, a destructor. When you start a class, you have a constructor to create the class, but the opposite is missing. You have nothing to automatically clean up because the cleanup is not happening at the moment when you stop using the class. It's happening seconds, minutes later. So you cannot trust when this happens. It's a little bit like some European garbage collector services, which come sooner or later.
Have you seen many complications with the memory collection and destruction when using components? Does that change the equation? No.
No. If you make a memory leak problem in a component, it works as crazy as it works in the main application. Doesn't matter. It is just more difficult to debug.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, the things to be very careful is XML. Because XML is usually taking megabytes or could easily take megabytes, at least kilobytes. This is the biggest one. The smaller ones are menus and hierarchical lists. Many years ago, a typical way to create memory leaks was for the write, because people created an off-screen area and forgot to clear the off-screen area. Some people might remember starting with 6.5, 6.7, I don't remember. We added an alert when you quit 4D, you got a message there was still some 4D write off-screen areas open. It was a debug info to avoid that everybody is screaming 4D is losing memory, because when people was finding that, fixing it, and problem solved. And in 4D Write Pro, we do not have off-screen areas any longer because we simply use an object. And as long as the object is in use, we have a kind of off-screen area. And when that local variable storing the object is not existing any longer, we automatically clean up.
Well, great discussion. Tim, did you have one more or no?
No, I'm just checking my code again because I was worried about a memory leak. I had to check one more time to make sure that asterisk is there, and it is.
All right. Well, that was a fantastic presentation, and I can't wait to give it a swing myself to set this stuff up. But if anyone beats me to it, please do share, because it just seems like there's a whole bunch of different metrics we could be showing. So I'm sure there's more out there that that weren't shown today. So yeah, in our next meeting, which you can see on the schedule at 4dmethod.com/schedule, we will be hearing from, I'm sure we've all seen his example code through 4DPop or otherwise. If you haven't looked under the hood of 4DPop or any of his other repositories or components, you should. We'll have Vincent Delachaux give us a demo called Avec Classe. I think I'm saying that right. Avec Classe. User interface with class, and he is he's a magician, sorcerer. I don't know what a good way to say it is, but definitely get a good night's sleep before you come to the next meeting, because he's going to exercise your brain. So yeah, any feedback and discussion is always appreciated. You can give feedback on discuss4d.com. You can also support the group further with Patreon at patreon.com/4dmethod. But otherwise, we've had a long meeting, and I'll let y'all move on here. One more question in the chat. Does the chat get saved with the recording? It does, but I don't always put that up. If you're interested in it, I can also provide a link to the chat, because there's always good information that that comes up in the chat. Sure, will do, Richard. Yeah, and appreciate all of you for taking part and all the great questions you put forth. And Tomas, it's always good, excellent material. Thank you to everyone else at 4D for the news segment. And otherwise, hey, Jeff, great dashboard. I might even put a, if you don't mind, put that up in the post as well to show what you can really do. Let me know if I shouldn't. Anyways, yeah, so we'll see you all in the next meeting, and thanks so much for taking part.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Thomas. Great presentation.
Thanks.